The Brexit Chief Negotiator may have let the cat out of the bag. Overheard in a Brussels hotel bar, Ollie Robbins spoke of how MPs could face a choice between Theresa May's deal or a long, very long extension of the Brexit deadline. For those who yearn to leave, it feels like the finishing line, just within sight, could move way out of view, perhaps a year away.
From the department.
Theresa May in the Commons was asked to commit to the original deadline for leaving the EU.
Notwithstanding Brussels barroom chatter, will the Prime Minister rule out a delay of Brexit beyond March the 29th?
I'm grateful that he has asked me that question rather than relying on what someone said to someone else as overheard by someone else in a bar. It's very clear the government's position is the same. We triggered Article 50. In fact, this House voted to trigger Article 50. That had a 2-year timeline. That ends on the 29th of March. We want to leave with a deal, and that's what we're working for.
No, I didn't get a cast-iron guarantee from the Prime Minister that we will leave on the 29th of March. That does concern me, because that is what MPs voted for last year in terms of the EU Withdrawal Act. That is the law of the land. That should be respected.
Supporters of a second referendum see it very differently.
I think it's entirely reasonable for the European Union to actually ask us to do an extensive extension, because in effect...
About a year or so sounds about right to you?
Well, you know, certainly the situation is that if we haven't managed to do things over the past 2.5 years, then I can't see why we'd be confident of doing something in the next 3 months. So does that help my cause? The answer to that is yes, probably.
Some Brexiteers' blood chilled at the thought of a long extension. They suspect the Prime Minister is privately committed to avoiding no deal and could opt for the long delay in Brexit if her deal was defeated again in the Commons.
Those who want to reverse the Brexit decision want to delay and prevaricate and want to kick the can down the street. You pick the phrases that fits that in a hope that somehow it will never actually happen. I think that is a very dangerous game to be playing. I think it is playing with fire.
And there could be a breakdown of order.
I think people would be very angry.
I'm sure that it would anger people, but I think that if we left without an agreement on the 29th of March, the impact of that would also anger people. If we started to see significant loss of jobs in the agriculture sector in my constituency, we would see some anger. If we started to see car factories closing for a month and then not reopening, we'd start to see anger. So I think, the people who are making those claims need to be very, very careful.
Outside Parliament, another London taxicabs standstill protest against restrictions on their routes. Critics of Brexit say it's stalled Brexit progress on many fronts. That means they're right to try to stall Brexit itself. The Sun newspaper today published the government's internal tally for how many of the EU trade deals it's got signed off to carry on with if it leaves the EU in March without a deal. It shows only 6 on track, code green, including the Faroe Islands and Switzerland, compared with 8 off track, including Canada and South Korea. 19 are marked as significantly off track, and 4 marked black, impossible to complete, including Turkey and Japan.
Some countries have said that they didn't like, for example, some of the human rights elements that were incorporated by the European Union, and they would like us to drop those in order to roll the agreements over. Mr. Speaker, I am not inclined to do so.
That problem would, of course, return in any fresh post-Brexit trade talks. A prodding tweet tonight from European Council President Donald Tusk. No news is not always good news, he wrote. Still waiting for concrete, realistic proposals from London on how to break Brexit impasse. In a newspaper interview tonight, the long-standing British ally in the EU, Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, said Britain was now a diminished country, facing insurmountable and devastating economic consequences from Brexit. The ball, he said, is rolling towards the Dover cliff, and nobody on the UK side is doing anything about it.
Well, I'm joined now by the Eurosceptic Ben Bradley, a former vice chair of the Conservative Party who resigned from that role last July rather than support the Prime Minister's Chequers Brexit plan. So if we get to the end of March and the choice is, as Ollie Robbins was overheard by an ITV correspondent, saying between delay and the Prime Minister's deal, how are you going to vote?
Well, I don't accept that premise, to be honest. I think to an extent the Prime Minister's right. It sounds to me like Ollie Robbins is showing off in a bar after a few pints. It's not acceptable, it's unprofessional. Well, ministers make these decisions, not civil servants. Civil servants enact the decisions of ministers. So I'm more inclined to listen to those decision makers than to, as she said, somebody saying something to someone in a bar.
Because it makes perfect sense that the Cooper Amendment at the end of this month gets carried, no deal gets taken off the table as an option, and then you're only left with the option of the deal or a delay, suspending the Article 50 process. So well, it's perfectly logical. It's not a mad prediction. So if it gets down to that choice, which side are you on?
I'm not on either of those sides. I think we should leave on the 29th of March. I think that has to be the way forward. That's what is the only thing that's going to be acceptable to my constituents. I'm personally of the view that we need to make that decision this month as to the way we're going forward. That 26th, 27th is going to be key because we need the time to pass legislation. And in the event that we can't agree a deal, we need the time to be able to prepare for that fully and to talk about with the European Union about how we manage that and potentially still have implementation periods in the future.
I recognise you don't like either the deal or the idea of delay, but which is the lesser of two evils? Which do you prefer?
Well, I'm certainly not going to vote for the deal without change to it, without legally binding change. I think, in the event that we can't do that, we should leave on the 29th.
So, well,
I'm not totally averse.
That's what I'm saying. There's no point saying we should leave on the 29th. Let's assume that's off the table.
Well, that's what the Prime Minister's saying, and she makes the decisions, not Ollie Robbins.
Well, yeah, but MPs are going to vote on this in the next couple of weeks, as you know. So let's assume that Ollie Robbins is right in his predictions, and that's off the table. What you're saying is you will vote for delay rather than the deal.
I would struggle to vote for either, to be honest, and I don't know bluntly what I would do in that situation. I don't think it will come to that.
You don't know?
I don't know, because I don't think that will happen. Well, until I'm faced with that premise, you're putting hypothetical things that may or may not happen without knowing details. I'm elected to decide based on the details that are in front of me, not speculation of what might happen in a month, and I'll do that.
So you're playing your cards very close then?
Well, I can't tell you what I'm going to do in a month's time in a hypothetical, don't know what's going to happen, do we? But I don't think that will be the case. I think we need to make a decision this month. I think the 26th, 27th is the kind of key time for that decision.
OK. Do you know what you're going to do tomorrow night?
The politicians. Tomorrow night, I think I'm inclined to support the proposal as we supported last time with the Brady Amendment included. I don't think none of it's binding. I think really tomorrow is almost irrelevant to an extent in that we're waiting for the Prime Minister to come back in a few weeks' time with an improved offer.
But will you vote against the government's motion?
I'm waiting to see what the motion says, if it includes...
So you don't know what you're going to do tomorrow either?
Well, I don't know what the motion says. I can't tell you what I'm going to vote on if I don't know what the proposition is. So if it includes the option, if it's asking me to support taking no deal off the table, then no, I wouldn't support that. But we won't know that till the morning.
And why do you think it would ask you to take no deal off the table, given it's a neutral motion?
Well, if it asks us to approve exactly what we voted on last time in the House, obviously one of those amendments to the motion last time was to take no deal off the table, one that I didn't support. But those conversations about what that looks like tomorrow, what the wording of that motion is tomorrow, is still ongoing, as far as I'm aware.
Now, Liam Fox promised us 40 trade deals by the strike of midnight when Brexit goes through. That's not going to happen now, is it?
Possibly not 40. I mean, we're working towards a lot of those. Some delayed, but no reason why some of those can't be recovered. I accept the premise that obviously clearly 40 are not going to be signed and sealed by that date. I hope it won't come to that. I hope we'll have an implementation period and the time to put those together. But some of those are, major trading economies. Switzerland, for example, our 5th biggest trading partner, I think. So some major agreements there. And I know the department are working very hard to get as many of those across the line as they can.
Ben Bradley, thank you very much. Jackie.
Now, the Prime Minister has once again backed the Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling, as he faced further criticism in Parliament over the awarding of a contract to provide ferries in the event of a no-deal Brexit to a company with no ships. Theresa May insisted that due diligence was carried out before start-up company Seabourn Freight was given a now rescinded contract. But this afternoon, MPs grilled a senior Department of Transport civil servant about how rigorous the checks into Seabourn's main investor really were. Our business editor, Siobhan Kennedy, reports.
It turned out the only ship Seabourn Freight ever had was the one on its logo. Now that's vanished too. Today was the first chance for Jeremy Corbyn to take on Theresa May about the decision to yank the contract with the Phantom Ferry Company just weeks before we leave the EU.
A company with no ships and no trading history On the 8th of January, the Transport Secretary told the House, "We're confident the firm will deliver the service." What went wrong?
We know what the government says went wrong. It claims it pulled the rug on Seabourn at the weekend when its main backer, Arklow Shipping, walked away. Without Arklow on board, Chris Grayling, the Transport Secretary, insisted a deal wasn't viable. The Prime Minister today stuck by the line that proper checks had been made.
The contract was awarded following commercial, technical and financial assurance at a level in line with the company's status as a new entrant to the market, carried out not only by senior DfT officials, but by third-party organisations with experience and expertise in this area.
But just look at this. This is the breakdown of that due diligence. And on the financial checks, the experts conclude the standard tests could not be completed on Seabourn given a lack of existing financial information. When it came to Seabourn's technical competence, the review flagged significant execution risks relating to the Seabourn bid. And as to its commercial suitability, the lawyers undertook a basic background check on Seabourn to ensure they passed a basic blush test. There was no sign of Chris Grayling in the Commons, and it was left to his department's senior civil servant to face a grilling from MPs and some pretty awkward questions about just how much contact they'd had with Seabourn's backer, Arklow.
Did you have any paperwork to show that Arklow were actually going to be the backer of Seabourn?
We certainly, during the course of December, did have kind of evidence that confirmed that they were a backer who were intending to.
What evidence was that?
They had presented evidence to Seabourn, was the effect that yes, we look forward to working with this company as a trading partner.
Chris Grayling has consistently said the due diligence done on Seabourn Freight was robust. Yet today we learned that, in fact, they had relied on what were described as intimations from Seabourn that it had a serious backer in Arklow Shipping. It turns out the government had had no direct contact with Arklow itself, but had gone ahead and signed the contract with Seabourn Freight anyway.
When did you first get a letter or any comfort from Arklow directly?
We got a formal letter to my Secretary of State from Arklow on the 15th of January from recollection.
Right, so after you'd let the contract?
Yes, after, but we had intimations via Seabourn that they
so
would have been asking that question.
You took the word of Seabourn?
I would need to check what precise pieces of paper were in play at that point.
A clearly ruffled civil servant says she'll check the papers. But for now, this much is clear. Chris Grayling trusted the word of a shipping company with no ships that it had investors and put weight on due diligence that repeatedly flagged the risk of signing with Seabourn.